Birthdays are supposed to be celebrations, not funerals for 30-year marriages. Yet here I sat, staring at divorce papers wrapped in silver gift paper, complete with a gaudy bow on top. Frank always did have a twisted sense of humor. I'm Elsie, and my husband just told me he wants to start a new life. Without me. On my 55th birthday. I think it's best if we handle this amicably, Frank said, his voice carrying that same measured tone he used when explaining complex engineering problems to clients. I've already spoken with my lawyer. He's drawn up a fair settlement. The restaurant buzzed around us, other diners laughing and clinking glasses. A waiter hovered nearby, probably wondering why the woman at table 12 was clutching unopened gift wrap like it might explode. Fair? The word tasted bitter. You ambush me at dinner and call this fair? Frank adjusted his collar, a nervous tic I'd noticed over 3 decades of marriage. I thought a public place would help keep things civil. Civil? I laughed, drawing stares from nearby tables. Like serving divorce papers for dessert? Lower your voice, Elsie. People are starting to stare. Let them. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against hardwood. 30 years, Frank. 30 years of cooking your meals, ironing your shirts, supporting your career. And this is how you thank me? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. I've given you everything you could want. A beautiful home, financial security. Everything except loyalty. The words shot out before I could stop them. His face tightened. This isn't about loyalty. We've grown apart. You must have noticed. Of course I'd noticed. The late nights at work, the mysterious business trips, the new cologne he'd started wearing 6 months ago. I wasn't stupid, just willfully blind. Is there someone else? Frank's silence was answer enough. Who is she? That's not important right now. He reached for his wallet, pulling out crisp bills. Let's not make this uglier than it needs to be. I stood up, my hands shaking. You're right about one thing, Frank. This doesn't need to be ugly. I picked up my water glass. It can be spectacular. The water hit his face before he could react, drawing gasps from nearby diners. As it dripped down his expensive shirt, I saw something I'd never seen before, fear in his eyes. Happy birthday to me, I said, dropping the empty glass on the table. And Frank, tell your lawyer to expect a call from mine. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, leaving behind 3 decades of marriage and a very wet soon-to-be ex-husband. My phone buzzed in my purse, probably Megan calling to wish me happy birthday. Our daughter didn't know yet. Nobody did. In the parking lot, my composure cracked. Tears burned my eyes as I fumbled with my car keys, but I refused to let them fall. Frank wanted amicable. He should have thought of that before gift wrapping my heartbreak. The divorce papers sat in my passenger seat, that ridiculous bow mocking me. I started the engine, my mind already racing with questions. Where would I live? What would I tell our friends? How would Megan react? But beneath the fear and hurt, something else stirred, something that felt dangerously like revenge. Frank thought he could discard me like yesterday's newspaper, start fresh with whoever she was. He thought I'd roll over, take his fair settlement, and disappear quietly. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. I pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind the restaurant where my marriage ended. Ahead lay uncertainty, fear, and pain, but also possibility. And perhaps, just perhaps, the sweet taste of justice. Happy birthday to me, indeed. Megan's face twisted with rage as she paced my kitchen, her heels clicking against the tile like angry punctuation marks. He did what? I watched her from my seat at the counter, wondering how my daughter had grown into such a fierce defender. The divorce papers lay between us, that gaudy bow now crushed and forgotten. Your father thinks he's being generous, I said, tracing the rim of my coffee mug. He's offering me the house. The house you both own? How magnanimous of him. Megan stopped pacing, her marketing executive persona slipping into place. What about his pension, the investments, the vacation property? According to these papers, those stay with him, for his retirement plans. His retirement plans? Megan's laugh could have cut glass. I'm calling him. Megan, don't. But she already had her phone out, jabbing at the screen. The call connected on speaker, Frank's voice filling the kitchen. Megan, I'm in a meeting. Cancel it. We need to talk about what you did to Mom. A heavy sigh crackled through the speaker. Your mother and I are handling this like adults. I'd appreciate if you'd stay out of it. Stay out of it? Megan's knuckles whitened around the phone. You served her divorce papers on her birthday, in a restaurant. It was a controlled environment. It was cruel, Dad. And this settlement, it's insulting. The settlement is more than fair. His voice took on that condescending tone I'd grown to hate. Your mother hasn't worked in 30 years. The house gives her security. The house gives you an easy out, Megan snapped. What about the money you've been moving around lately? Those new accounts Mom doesn't know about? The silence that followed was deafening. I straightened in my chair, watching my daughter's face carefully. What accounts? Lucas noticed some irregularities when he was helping you with your taxes last month, Megan said, her eyes locked on the phone. Want to explain those, Dad? Your husband had no right to go through my personal finances. Frank's voice had lost its patronizing edge, replaced by something sharper. And you have no right to interfere in matters between your mother and me. Someone needs to look out for her interests, since you clearly aren't. I'm done discussing this. The line went dead. Megan set the phone down carefully, too carefully. Mom, there's something you need to know. Lucas found... Not yet. I stood up, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. First, I need a lawyer. Then we can talk about what Lucas found. I have a name, someone who specializes in high-conflict divorces. She pulled out a business card, sliding it across the counter. She's expensive, but she's the best. I picked up the card, running my thumb over the embossed letters. Your father will be furious if I challenge the settlement. Good. Megan's smile was all teeth. Let him be furious. Let him see what happens when he underestimates you. Looking at my daughter, I saw myself at her age, fierce, determined, ready to take on the world. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost that fire. Or maybe I'd just buried it under years of compromise and careful peacekeeping. There's something else, Megan said, her expression softening. Lucas and I want you to stay with us until this is sorted out. The guest room's already made up. I couldn't impose. It's not imposing. It's family. She reached across the counter, squeezing my hand. Besides, it'll drive Dad crazy knowing you're not sitting at home waiting for his next move. For the first time since that disastrous birthday dinner, I felt something like hope. Frank thought he had me cornered, relegated to the role of discarded wife, accepting whatever scraps he deigned to offer. He'd forgotten who I was before I became Mrs. Frank Anderson. Time to remind him. I picked up the divorce papers, noting how my hands no longer shook. Call the lawyer, set up a meeting. I met Megan's gaze, seeing my own determination reflected back. Let's show your father what happens when he mistakes kindness for weakness. The photograph landed on my lawyer's desk with the weight of a bomb. Lucas had found it buried in Frank's cloud storage. My husband and a woman I didn't recognize, intimately entangled at what looked like a hotel bar. The date stamp showed 3 months ago, during what Frank had called a critical business conference in Phoenix. Her name is Grace Matthews, Lucas said, his usual calm demeanor tinged with disgust. She was a consultant at Frank's company before he retired, 35 years old. The age hit me like a physical blow, 20 years younger than me. I stared at her glossy, dark hair, her perfectly manicured hands on my husband's arm, the way she looked at him like he was her future. There's more, Megan added, pulling out her tablet. She's been appointed to 3 different tech company boards in the last 6 months, companies Frank had connections with. My lawyer, Catherine Walsh, studied the information with sharp eyes. And the accounts you mentioned? Lucas pulled up several spreadsheets. Frank's been moving significant amounts into offshore accounts. Started about 8 months ago, right around when Grace Matthews began her meteoric rise in the industry. He's been planning this, I said, my voice hollow. All those late nights, the business trips, the secret phone calls. He wasn't just having an affair. He was building her career. With your marital assets, Catherine noted, typing rapidly, this changes everything. The settlement he offered isn't just unfair, it's fraudulent. A memory surfaced. Frank at our kitchen table, asking me to sign papers for what he called retirement planning. I'd trusted him completely, never questioning, never doubting. What's our next move? Megan asked, her hand squeezing mine. Catherine's smile was predatory. We file for emergency injunctions on all accounts. Then we request a forensic accountant to trace every penny he's moved. And most importantly, She tapped the photograph. We make it clear we know about Grace. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank. We need to talk. Dinner tonight? He knows we're here, I said, showing them the message. He's trying to control the situation. Good, Catherine replied. Let him think he still can. Meet him for dinner, record everything. But first, she handed me a stack of papers. Sign these. We're filing them this afternoon. Later, at an upscale restaurant Frank had chosen, I watched him fidget with his wedding ring, the one he still wore, despite everything. His tell when he was about to lie. Elsie, be reasonable, he started. This hostile approach isn't like you. No? I sipped my wine, savoring the moment. How would you know what I'm like, Frank? You've been too busy with Grace Matthews to notice. The color drained from his face. Who told you? Does it matter? What matters is what you've been doing with our money, our future. I can explain the board appointments, the offshore accounts, the hotel rooms. Each question hit him like a slap. Save your explanations for the forensic accountant. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You're making a mistake. I offered you a clean break, a comfortable life. Don't throw that away for spite. Spite? I met his gaze steadily. No, Frank, this isn't spite. This is justice. You'll get nothing, he snarled. I'll fight you every step. Like you fought for those board positions for Grace? I stood, dropping my napkin on the table. I wonder what the ethics committees would think about that. Fear flickered in his eyes. Real fear, like at my birthday dinner. But this time, I didn't just see it. I savored it. You taught me something, Frank, I said, gathering my purse. You taught me that sometimes the people we trust the most deserve it the least. I'll remember that lesson. And so will you. I left him there, staring at his untouched meal, knowing his perfectly planned future was unraveling thread by thread. In my purse, my phone recorded every word, every threat, every admission. The game had changed. Frank thought he was dealing with the same compliant wife who'd signed papers without reading them, who'd believed every lie, who'd put his needs first for 30 years. He was about to discover just how wrong he was. The email arrived at 3 a.m, sent from an address I didn't recognize. One line of text followed by attachments. You should know what you're up against. I clicked through photos of Frank and Grace at various events, each more intimate than the last. Then came the documents. Bank statements, property records, incorporation papers. Grace's name appeared everywhere, woven through Frank's business dealings like a poisonous thread. My hands shook as I forwarded everything to Catherine. Sleep was impossible now, so I wandered into Megan and Lucas's kitchen, where the midnight silence felt less oppressive than my temporary bedroom. Mom? Lucas appeared in the doorway, laptop under his arm. I heard you up. Anonymous email, I said, gesturing to my phone. Someone's feeding us information. He set his laptop on the counter, pulling up files. I've been tracking Frank's digital footprint. There's something else you need to see. The screen showed a real estate listing, a modern penthouse downtown, purchased 3 months ago through a shell company. The kind of place Frank always claimed was wastefully extravagant. It gets worse, Lucas said quietly. Check the move-in date. Next week, the same week Frank had insisted we needed to finalize the divorce. He's been planning this for months, I whispered. Years, maybe. There's more, Lucas hesitated. The shell company? Grace is listed as co-owner. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. I grabbed my car keys. Mom, where are you going? To see my house, while it's still mine. Lucas grabbed his jacket. I'm coming with you. The drive was silent. Our family home emerged from the darkness, its familiar outline now seeming false, like a stage set hiding ugly truths. My key still worked. Inside, everything looked normal. Family photos, collected memories, 30 years of life together. But something was off. The study, I realized, heading upstairs. Frank's private space had always been off limits. His sanctuary for work, he'd called it. Now I knew better. The door was locked, but Lucas made quick work of it. Inside, Frank's usually immaculate desk was chaos. Papers everywhere, drawers left open. He's been here tonight, Lucas said, examining the mess. Looking for something specific. I started sorting through papers, muscle memory from years of organizing Frank's life taking over. Bank statements, investment records, a half-empty bottle of expensive scotch I'd never seen before. Then I found it. buried under tax forms, a handwritten letter from Grace. Frank, everything's ready. The boards are secured, the accounts are clean. After the divorce, we'll have full control. She'll never know how long we've been planning this. All your careful grooming of me is about to pay off. The words blurred. I sat heavily in Frank's chair, the leather still warm from his recent presence. Mom? Lucas's voice seemed far away. He didn't just betray me, I said, my voice strange to my own ears. He used me. All those years I supported him, managed his life, helped him climb the corporate ladder. I was just a stepping stone. Lucas gathered the papers quickly, taking photos with his phone. This is evidence. Catherine can use this. No. I stood up, something cold and clear crystallizing in my chest. Not yet. Frank's looking for these papers for a reason. They're valuable to him. What are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to stop playing defense. I picked up Frank's scotch bottle, studying it. He taught Grace everything she knows about business, but he taught me everything about him. A car door slammed outside. Headlights swept across the windows. He's back, Lucas whispered. I grabbed the letters and key documents, leaving the rest scattered. Good. Let him wonder what's missing. Let him worry about what I know. We slipped out the back door as Frank's key turned in the front lock. In the car, Lucas looked at me with concern. Are you okay? I watched my house, Frank's house, disappear in the rearview mirror. No, but I will be. Because now I know exactly what kind of game we're playing. And for the first time, I was ready to play to win. The art studio smelled of turpentine and possibility. Megan had insisted I take these classes, claiming I needed something for myself. What she really meant was I needed somewhere to be that wasn't her guest room, obsessing over Frank's betrayal. Your strokes are too controlled, my instructor said, studying my canvas. Let go of the precision. Feel the emotion. Easier said than done. 30 years of measuring my words, controlling my reactions, being the perfect corporate wife, it becomes a habit. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meeting at Riverside Cafe in 30 minutes. Come alone. Gee, Grace. My hands trembled, smearing red paint across the canvas like a wound. I need to go, I told the instructor, already reaching for my bag. The cafe was busy. Smart choice on her part. Public enough to feel safe, noisy enough for privacy. Grace sat at a corner table looking exactly like her photos. Polished, poised, younger than my marriage. Thank you for coming, Elsie. Her smile was practiced, professional. I thought it was time we met. I sat down, noting how she'd positioned herself to watch the door. Why? Because Frank is going to destroy both of us if we let him. That wasn't what I expected. Funny, from the letters I found, you two seemed quite cozy. Letters can lie. She slid a folder across the table. Like these board appointments he arranged for me. They come with strings, and evidence of securities fraud. I didn't touch the folder. Why tell me this? Because he's setting me up to take the fall. Her perfect composure cracked slightly. The offshore accounts, the irregular trades, everything's in my name. When the SEC investigates, and they will, I'll be the scapegoat. While Frank walks away clean, I finished, pieces clicking into place, with my money and your reputation. He's better at this game than either of us realized. She leaned forward, but together. Stop. I held up my hand. Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. You helped him betray me. I did. No denial, no excuse. And now I'm helping you destroy him. Take the folder, Elsie. Use it. My phone buzzed again. Frank this time. Where are you? We need to talk about the house papers. Grace's eyes flickered to the message. He's getting desperate. The SEC's starting their preliminary inquiry next week. I stood up, leaving the folder untouched. Handle your own mess. He'll win, she called after me. He always wins. Outside, the autumn air felt thick with possibilities. I called Catherine. Grace Matthews just tried to make a deal, I said when she answered. Something about SEC investigations and fraud evidence. Don't touch anything she offers, Catherine warned. It could be a trap. I know. I watched Grace through the cafe window, seeing not a manipulative homewrecker, but another of Frank's carefully positioned pawns. But what if we let her think I did? That evening, at my art class's open studio hours, I stood before a fresh canvas. The instructor's words echoed, "Let go of the precision. Feel the emotion." I thought of Frank's betrayal, of Grace's desperation, of 30 years reduced to legal documents and hidden accounts. My brush moved without conscious thought, spreading dark colors across white space. "Mom?" Megan's voice behind me. "That's intense." I stepped back, seeing my painting through her eyes, chaos and anger and pain made visible, not precise, not controlled, not safe. "Frank called me today," Megan said quietly. "He's worried about you. Says you're not thinking clearly." I laughed, harsh and genuine. He should be worried, but not about my clarity. My phone lit up with another message from Grace. "Time's running out. What's your answer?" I studied my painting, all that contained rage finally breaking free. Then I typed, "Meet me tomorrow, same place. Bring everything you have." "Mom?" Megan touched my arm. "What are you planning?" I picked up my brush again, adding one final streak of red across the canvas. "I'm done being a pawn, sweetheart. It's time to play like a queen." The paint looked like blood in the studio's harsh lights. Good, because one way or another, someone was going to bleed. The boardroom at Catherine's law office felt like a tomb. Frank sat across from me, Grace beside him, both wearing expressions of practiced concern. The SEC documents lay between us like landmines. "This is a mistake, Elsie," Frank said, his voice carrying that familiar patronizing tone. "You're letting emotion cloud your judgment." I studied the man I'd loved for 30 years, searching for any trace of the person I thought I knew. Emotion? Like the kind that made you forge my signature on those transfer documents? His facade cracked slightly. "That's a serious accusation." "Everything in these files is serious." I pushed the documents toward him. Securities fraud, money laundering, creative accounting that would make Bernie Madoff blush. Grace shifted uncomfortably. Frank's hand twitched toward hers, then stopped. The gesture wasn't lost on me. "You're still trying to protect her," I said quietly, "even now when she's helped me build this case against you." His head snapped toward Grace, who paled visibly. "What?" "Don't act surprised, Frank." My voice stayed steady, though my hands shook under the table. "Did you really think she'd take the fall for you? That she'd sacrifice herself for love? Grace?" His voice held a dangerous edge. She straightened, mask slipping into place. "It's business, Frank. You taught me that." The look he gave her could have frozen hell. Then he smiled, that same smile he'd worn when serving me divorce papers on my birthday. "Interesting play," he said, standing. "But you've overlooked something crucial." He pulled out his phone, tapped briefly, then set it on the table. "Check your email, Catherine." My lawyer frowned, opening her laptop. Her sharp intake of breath made my stomach drop. "What is it?" I asked. "He's filed a countersuit," Catherine said slowly, "alleging you knew about and approved all financial transactions, with documentation." "Impossible." "The renovation contracts," Frank cut in smoothly. "The charity board minutes. All those papers you signed without reading, trusting your loving husband to handle the details." His smile widened. "Your signature's on everything, darling. And unlike mine, they're all authentic." The room spun slightly. All those years of blind trust, of signing whatever he put in front of me, of playing the supportive wife. "You'll go down with me," I managed. "No, Elsie. I'll weather this storm with my young, naive protege who was led astray by my manipulative, soon-to-be ex-wife." He gathered his papers carefully. "The board members know me. They'll believe what's easier to accept, that a bitter woman is seeking revenge, not that their trusted colleague orchestrated fraud." Grace sat frozen, her ambitious future crumbling visibly. "You're bluffing," I whispered. "Try me." He headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and Elsie? The art studio called. They're concerned about your recent, aggressive works. Apparently, my worried calls about your mental state made quite an impression." The door closed behind him with terrible finality. "He's thought of everything," Grace said numbly. "He always does." Catherine was already typing frantically, damage control mode engaged, but I barely heard her strategy suggestions. All I could see was Frank's smile, the same one he'd worn at our wedding, at Megan's birth, at countless dinner parties where I'd played the perfect corporate wife. My phone buzzed, Megan asking how the meeting went. I couldn't answer. Couldn't tell her that her father had just outmaneuvered us all. Couldn't admit that 30 years of trust had become the weapon of my own destruction. "What do we do now?" Grace asked, looking as lost as I felt. I stood up, legs unsteady. "I need air." In the hallway, I caught my reflection in a window. Gray-streaked hair, lines earned from years of smiling at Frank's jokes, wearing Frank's choices, being Frank's wife. My phone buzzed again. A text from Frank. "The house papers need your signature by tomorrow. Let's not make this messier than it needs to be." I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching the city below continue its normal rhythm, unaware that my world was imploding. Then I straightened, remembering my latest painting, chaos and rage and something else, something that looked like freedom. Frank had thought of everything. Almost everything. The annual tech industry gala buzzed with artificial cheer, a perfect stage for what was about to unfold. I adjusted my black evening gown, the one Frank always said was too bold, and watched him work the room, Grace at his side like a trophy. Lucas appeared beside me, champagne in hand. The USB drive is planted in his laptop. Megan's got the presentation queued up. I checked my phone. One new message from Catherine. "SEC team standing by, give the signal." Frank caught my eye across the room, his smile faltering slightly. He excused himself from his group, making his way over. "Elsie, I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm still on the charity board, Frank. Remember? All those papers you had me sign?" His jaw tightened. "We should talk privately." "Actually," I gestured to the stage, "I believe you're about to give your retirement speech. Don't let me keep you." He studied my face, searching for tells he'd learned over 30 years. I gave him nothing. The chairman called Frank to the stage. Applause rippled through the room as he took his position behind the podium, Grace beaming from the front row. "Distinguished colleagues," he began, "after 30 years in this industry." The presentation screen behind him flickered. His carefully prepared slides disappeared, replaced by financial documents, email exchanges, and photos. All the evidence we'd gathered, now displayed for his peers to see. Frank faltered mid-sentence, turning to look. His face went ash-white. "Keep going, Frank," I called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell them about your retirement plans, the offshore accounts, the manipulated board appointments, the fraud you plan to pin on your mistress." Grace stood up sharply, her perfect composure cracking. "You said you'd protect me." "He lies, Grace. That's what he does." I moved toward the stage. "He used my signatures to build his empire, used your ambition to create his scapegoat, and thought he could discard us both when it suited him." Security guards appeared at the doors. Not hotel security, but SEC agents. Frank saw them too. His hands gripped the podium. "This is a mistake," he announced to the shocked crowd. "My wife is unwell." "Your wife," I cut in, "has been working with federal investigators for weeks. Those signatures you relied on? Every document dated after your affair began is now evidence of coercion in a federal fraud investigation." The room erupted in whispers. Board members stepped back from Frank like he was contagious. Grace slipped toward the exit but found her path blocked by agents. "You can't prove anything," Frank hissed, but his voice shook. "Check your laptop, dear. The one you use for private trading. It's amazing what a forensic accountant can find with full access." His eyes widened. Finally, he understood. "You taught me well, Frank. All those years watching you manipulate people, watching you build your house of cards." I smiled, his smile, the one he'd worn while serving me divorce papers. "I learned." The SEC agents moved in. Grace was already in tears, spilling everything to save herself. Board members huddled with their lawyers, and Frank stood frozen, watching 30 years of careful planning collapse. "The house papers," he said quietly as agents approached the stage. "You never signed them." "No, I didn't." I removed my wedding ring, placing it on the podium. "Consider it my retirement gift to you." They led him away in handcuffs, past shocked colleagues and flashing phones, past Megan, who stood straight-backed, her father's daughter in strength if not in character, past the life we'd built on lies and careful signatures. In the chaos, Lucas touched my arm. You okay? I watched Frank disappear through the doors, shoulders slumped, no longer the giant who had dominated my life. I thought this would feel more like victory. Maybe it's not about winning, he said quietly. Maybe it's about surviving. My phone buzzed, Catherine confirming that everything was proceeding as planned. The legal machinery would grind forward, justice would be served, and I was free. The taste wasn't exactly sweet, but it wasn't bitter either. It tasted like truth, like strength, like tomorrow. The gallery hummed with opening night energy as visitors moved between my paintings. Each canvas told a piece of my story, rage, betrayal, rebirth, though the patrons saw only abstract emotion in bold strokes. The series is called Signatures, I heard the curator explain to a group. Each piece explores themes of identity and power. I touched the simple silver pendant at my throat, my first purchase with my own money after the divorce settlement. Frank's assets were frozen pending his trial, but my share had been secured, along with something far more valuable, my freedom. That one's my favorite, Megan said, pointing to a particular piece. Dark lines tangled with splashes of crimson, but at the center, a small spark of gold broke through. I'd painted it the day Frank's plea deal was finalized. Mine too, I admitted, though I'm not sure why. I do. She squeezed my hand. It's the first one where you let the light in. A commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Grace stood there, looking less polished than during her testimony that had helped convict Frank. She spotted me and moved forward, ignoring the curious stares. I wasn't sure you'd come, I said when she reached us. I almost didn't. She studied the painting before us, the one where gold broke through darkness. The board positions fell through. All of them. I know. Was it worth it? Burning everything down? I considered her question carefully. Ask me again in 10 years. She nodded, understanding what I couldn't quite say. We'd both lost and won in different ways. She turned to leave, then paused. Frank asked about you, in prison. What did you tell him? That you're having an art show. A ghost of her old smile appeared. He wouldn't understand what that means, would he? After she left, Lucas appeared with champagne. Sold another one. The big piece from your angry period? I laughed, actually laughed. Is that what we're calling it? Better than the month Mom went nuclear on Dad, Megan quipped. The curator approached, beaming. Elsie, there's someone who'd like to discuss commissioning a series for their corporate offices. Go, Megan urged. Be brilliant. I moved through the gallery, noting how differently I carried myself now. No more careful steps, no more measured words. The woman who had signed papers without reading them was gone. Near the back wall hung my latest work, still untitled. Unlike the others, its colors were neither dark nor light, but something in between, complex, uncertain, real, like life after revenge. My phone buzzed. A message from Catherine. Judge denied Frank's appeal. It's really over. Over. Such a simple word for such a complicated truth. A young woman stood studying my untitled piece, her expression thoughtful. I can't decide if it's about endings or beginnings, she said as I approached. I touched my silver pendant, thinking of Frank in his prison cell, of Grace rebuilding her life, of Megan and Lucas's steadfast support, of my own reflection, finally recognizable again. Maybe it's both, I replied. Maybe that's the point. She nodded slowly. The technique here, it's unusual. Like you're signing your name across the whole canvas, over and over, but in colors instead of letters. I smiled, remembering all those years of signing Frank's papers, of writing his name beside mine, of letting my signature become a weapon he wielded. Sometimes, I said, you have to sign your name 1,000 times before you remember who you are. The gallery lights dimmed slightly, a signal that opening night was winding down. Soon Megan and Lucas would take me to dinner, and tomorrow I'd return to my studio, where blank canvases waited. Frank had taught me about power, about signatures, about careful plans and hidden motives. But he'd never understood the most important lesson. Sometimes the strongest signature isn't written at all. Sometimes it's painted in light breaking through darkness, in truth shattering lies, in the simple act of standing in a gallery surrounded by your own voice, finally and fully heard.